Hello, I'm Eric Corman, CEO at League of Education Voters and the parent of a high school junior of the global majority in the public school system who is accessing special education services. I advocate because of my son, so that every student can get what they need, when they need it, and how they need it. This webinar has closed captions. To access captioning, just click on the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen. Spanish interpretation is also available. To access this webinar in Spanish, in your webinar controls at the bottom of your screen, click Interpretation, which is the icon that looks like a globe, and then click Spanish. And if you want to hear only Spanish without the original English in the background, click Mute Original Audio. Special thanks to Claudia Azar, who is our interpreter. If you have any technical issues, feel free to use the chat function, which I will monitor throughout the webinar. In case you're not familiar with us, League of Education Voters is a statewide nonprofit working with families, educators, and leaders to create learning environments where every Washington student feels safe, supported, and a positive sense of belonging so that they can achieve academically and access the life they choose. Our website is educationvoters.org. We believe that education is a tool for justice. One of the systems that perpetuate racial and disability injustice experienced by global majority communities is our schools. We believe every child deserves an excellent public education that provides equitable opportunities for success. In order to achieve this, we must pursue radical change in our school systems for equity, justice, and liberation. We must build schools and systems that honor the humanity of every student. Welcome to our free online webinar series, Lunchtime LEVinars. We started this series 12 years ago to share information and build knowledge on important and timely issues. Today's webinar is about the 2026 legislative session recap, what Washington students got, and next steps. To wrap up the 2026 legislative session, League of Education Voters Chief Policy Officer Jacob Vella, Government Relations Consultant Carey Morris, and LEV partners will provide an overview of what happened in Olympia. In this webinar, they will also share what we can do to prepare for the upcoming session in 2027 and answer your questions. And now I would like the panelists to introduce yourselves, starting with Gabriel. Gabriel, feel free to popcorn to whoever you'd like to go next.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gabriel Linares. I'm a second-year member of the Washington Legislative Youth Advisory Council. And I'm just so excited to share our successes, our failures that we've had at LYAC this year. And I'm also joined by Lilah.
Hi, I'm Lilah Wakefield. I'm also a second year member at LYAC, Legislative Youth Advisory Council, and I'm also just so excited to be here and really talk about the legislative process and what we've done this year because it's really exciting to see as many youth as we can in government.
Okay, who would you like to pass to, Lilah?
I will pass it to Andrea.
Thank you, Lilah. I am Andrea Kadlik. I'm an attorney with Disability Rights Washington. Very happy to be here with you all today. We've been working for the last several years on restraint and isolation legislation. That's primarily what I'll be speaking about today. And I'll pass it to Carey.
Thank you, Andrea. Carey Morris. I am the contract lobbyist for the League of Education Voters, and I've had the pleasure of working with them for nearly almost 2 decades. It's crazy. So thanks for having me.
I'll just jump in next.
Yeah,
My name is Emily Bananek. I'm with the Washington State Budget and Policy Center, use they, them pronouns, and super excited to be here with you all. I'm going to talk about the revenue win that we saw this session. So excited for that. And Amber, I'll pass to you.
Thanks, Emily. My name is Amber Ulvanis, and I am a contract lobbyist as well. I am working with Washington Thriving. It's actually Behavioral Health Catalyst that's advancing the Washington Thriving plan to advance the work of the Children and Youth Behavioral Health Work Group in a strategic way. And I'll turn it over to Liz.
Hi, everyone. Liz Troutman. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the executive director at Stand for Children Washington, and we're a statewide nonprofit advocacy organization working on educational success and social progress. And so I'll be talking a little bit about some of the kind of high school success bucket leading into post-secondary opportunities for young people and how those priorities fared this session. I will pass it to Linda.
Thanks, Liz. Linda Hall, Treehouse. I'm the Senior Director of, what am I now? Government Relations and Advocacy. I always forget my job changes like every 3 years. I am representing Treehouse and our graduation success program win that we had this supplemental session. Who has not gone yet? Soleil?
I can go, yes. I know everyone was afraid to say my name wrong. So Linda, thanks for taking that risk. And you did it right. My name is Soleil Boyd, she, her pronouns. I'm the executive director at the Children's Alliance. I'll be speaking maybe very next about what we saw happen in early learning, health equity, and economic justice, which was a lot. So I think I'll pass it back to Eric and maybe you'll pass it back to me.
And I will pass it to Jacob, actually, is what I will do.
Yeah, thank you. As Eric mentioned, I'm Jake Vella. I'm the Chief Policy Officer at the League of Education Voters and he, him pronouns, and I'll be talking a little bit about some of the ed funding implications from the session as well.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here. To begin today's webinar, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the ancestral and unceded traditional lands of the 29 federally recognized and non-federally recognized tribes in Washington state, including the Chehalis, Chinook, Colville, Cowlitz, Duwamish, Ho, Jamestown S'Klallam, Kalispel, Lower Elwha Klallam, Lummi, Makah, Muckleshoot, Nisqually, Nooksack, Port Gamble S'Klallam, Puyallup, Quileute, Quinault, Samish, Sauk-Suiattle, Shoalwater Bay, Skokomish, Snoqualmie, Spokane, Squaxin Island, Stillaguamish, Suquamish, Swinomish, Tulalip, Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, Upper Skagit, and Yakima. We give thanks to our elders, both past and present, our Native and Indigenous colleagues, and the land itself. A couple of housekeeping items before we begin. You'll notice a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. This is a space for you to submit questions to us. If time permits, we'll have about 10 minutes for questions after the panel discussion wraps up. As always, feel free to send any feedback about the webinar quality to us on the chat function or at info@educationvoters.org. And speaking of the chat function, you're welcome to use it to check in and comment on anything you hear. Welcome, Gabriel, Lilah, Soleil, Linda, Andrea, Liz, Amber, Emily, Carey, and Jacob. We're going to go ahead and start with Carey Morris giving an overview of the 2026 legislative session, what happened. And then after that, we will pass it to Soleil, who will talk about early learning and health and other things. After that, we'll go to Emily to talk about revenue. We'll then go to Gabriel and Lilah to talk about what LYAC and the Youth Advisory Council has been up to and focused on. We'll then move to Linda with Treehouse, then Liz with Stand for Children Washington, Amber with Behavioral Health Catalyst and Washington Thriving, then to Andrea on isolation and restraint, and then to Jacob. So, Carey, take it away.
I started to giggle when you said I was going to say what happened in the last 60 days. I feel like I should be asking everybody else what happened because it was such a blur for those of us that were down there every day. We started the 60-day session in January, kind of under still the cloud of the changes in the federal government, unsure possibilities of what might be coming, another shutdown, et cetera, and then also with the budget deficit. So despite these issues that I think we're weighing on us. There continue also to be the tension between the majority party in the legislature and the governor's office. And then the new element of the House Republicans becoming experts on the process and doing procedural motions on the floor, including their ability to do a Washington filibuster, which means they just loaded up amendments to almost every single bill that came forward. So the time it took to pass a bill off the House floor was probably sometimes 3-4 times longer than it took in the Senate side. And that really showed up probably the most one we will all know about is the 25-hour continuous debate on the floor in the House on the millionaire's tax. And finally, with the passage, that was about 79 amendments, with only 6 being taken by the majority party. So despite all that, they still were able to do what their primary mission to do in Olympia was pass the 3 supplemental budgets. They do a transportation, a capital, and then kind of the star of the show is always the operating budget, at least for the issues that we work on. They did pass the budget, about an $80 billion budget. There were a lot of losses. They tried to even that out through all the different areas of the budget. I work in wearing different hats. Those, not just in education, felt it. We felt it also like in fish and wildlife and natural resources and every place. They tried to level it out. We saw quite a bit in education, including about 181 billion just in early learning alone. And then the charter schools, our public charter schools lost their additional enrichment funding, so that will really make them struggle moving forward. I will also say there were some positives. I'd like to bring up the Homeless Student Stability Program. That is a program that's run by grants to our school districts and community-based programs. And historically, they've only been really funding the program grants that go to the community-based organizations. And there's been a lack of funding going to the OSPI, which runs those educational programs. And in fact, we only got funding last year for 1 year of that program, which with all the changes that are happening, this is really affecting our homeless student population, which I believe is about 41,000. Does that sound about right? I think right now that's what we have. And so, and we have a real difference between rural and urban in our state, which is difficult. There's different needs that need to be met. So we are able to actually get the funding in the education part of that program again. So that's a $1.2 million investment they made, and hopefully that will be ongoing. And I want to tie that to a bill that passed this year, and it was a bill, it's House Bill 2594, and it is regarding unhoused students getting equitable access to public education. And this bill was really kind of brought forward based on some of the changes and concerns we have with the federal government. So what that meant was that if we lost McKinney-Vento Act, which is the federal act that serves and guarantees these programs and services and access to public education for unhoused students, we wanted to make sure we had it in our state, or if their hands were being tied about what populations of students we could serve with McKinney-Vento, we want to make sure that in our state law was still strong, saying that we serve all unhoused students. And so we got that passed. So it's now codified in our state statutes, so McKinney-Vento. So there'll be uniform kind of implementation of this act across our state. So that was actually a big plus that they passed that and also got us the money for that. So going forward, we're all still recovering from 60 days, but it initially, I think, 12 hours after, I got my first request for fundraiser for the campaign season that we're starting. It's going to be a big one. All the House members are up for re-election, and there's also going to be about 50% of the Senate members, and we're also seeing a lot of members leaving again. It's kind of been, when I started this work, people stayed in their seats for a while and gained some seniority. We're getting a larger turnover the last few years. We can expect another pretty large turnover. We won't know until May who will be running. So we're also concerned about all federal actions that might be happening between now and next session. And which exhausts me is that agencies are already starting their decision package process, which kind of shows what they're going to be putting forward in September. Amber's reacting. Yeah, it's kind of hard because I haven't recovered from last week, and the fact that I'm already getting emails saying this is what we're thinking about to do next year is just crazy to me, but that's happening. So I think those are the major issues of what happened this year, and I know that we're short on time, so I will stop talking, but I can answer any questions if anybody has any.
Great. Thanks so much, Carey. All right, Soleil with Children's Alliance, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eric, and thanks for that ramp up, Carey. You covered a lot, decision packages, oh my. But let's focus on early learning. And I will also touch on health equity, but I think there's a few folks here who can speak a bit to that, as well as the economic justice. So I may spend more of my time in the early learning space. As Carey mentioned, over 180 million, not billion, thank goodness, in cuts to early learning. So it was a disproportionate amount. And we consistently experience that in the early childhood sector is because there's not necessarily a protection for funding for early learning and early childhood. It is highly susceptible to cuts when the budget is tight. And that was true this year. Having said that, though, we do find that we had some important wins. Our agenda this year was to protect and preserve funding for early childhood and early learning programs. And so with that, we were able to preserve funding for the Working Connections Child Care Subsidy so that all families who qualify can continue to qualify and be able to access it. There was concerns about a cap that would have reduced access by thousands. The cap was not taken up. And with that, they found other ways to save hundreds or cut hundreds of millions in funding to the subsidy program. But what was preserved is that families can access the program. Currently, about 37,000 families participate. There's a wait list that bumps that up to 44,000 that would be in it if there was enough funding to reduce or put a cap to bring it down, would be moving in absolutely the wrong direction. So we're so glad that did not come to be. We also supported advocacy for ESIT, so early supports for infants and toddlers. There was concern about that being impacted in these budget cuts, which really alarmed us. But with really great coalition work and working with Kindering and other leaders in the space, we were able to effectively advocate to not have cuts to ESIT. And I'm so glad I can be on this side of that outcome right now. And then also we were able to support, really delay some of the disruptions that are coming with this subsidy. So the Working Connections Child Care Subsidy helps families pay for high quality early learning and care. And while we were able to maintain family access, that came kind of at the expense of how much child care providers are being reimbursed for the services and the high quality care they provide. So there's some delays in reductions to that funding that sort of stave off the impacts or soften that blow. We are concerned, though, and continue to advocate for fully funding the cost of quality care so that child care providers can earn a living wage, which almost none of them do, and so that we can expand access to high quality early care and education. So that continues to be an area of focus for us as we work with the Early Learning Action Alliance, the Early Learning Coalition that we facilitate. Just some other policy successes. The passed Senate Bill 5872, which is the Pre-K Promise Account. This expands access to ECAP, Early Childhood Education and Assistance Program. This is early care and education for low-income families or families with children with disabilities and other qualifying factors. This is really going to help expand that program. This account essentially allows the state to receive funding from the Balmer Group, which has made a 10-year commitment of up to $1 billion to fund ECAP. So that is really exciting. And we're glad we were part of passage of that bill. There were a number of others, including, I know you'll speak to House Bill 1795, which we also supported through the ELAW coalition, and we're advocating along with our partners at the ARC and beyond, to end isolation and restraint in public schools or to reduce them as this bill does. In health equity, our primary focus was really supporting access to health care for our immigrant neighbors and immigrant families, which are being impacted by federal cuts. And so ensuring that Apple Health is available to immigrant families and adults who have children likely to maintain that access, protecting school-based health services, and supporting the behavioral health partnership access line, which is a line for young people to access when they are in a behavioral health crisis. So we are pleased with those. I would say that we were unhappy that one of our agency-sponsored bills. House Bill 1834, Senate Bill 5708, protecting Washington kids online did not pass this year. This was a bill really designed to address the sort of algorithmic and constant feed of information to young people that disrupts their school day, can disrupt their sleep. And we were not able to pass that, but we learned a lot. And I'm happy to talk about that more at another time. And we intend to continue to pursue legislation, though, that makes sure young people have great behavioral, relational, emotional health, and that tech companies are held accountable when they undermine that. I don't think I need to say that a millionaire's tax passed. We were in strong support. There are many progressive revenue options. We focused on that one, and are happy to say we were part of supporting and advocating for the successful passage of the millionaire's tax. And I know other people will speak more eloquently to that, but we are so happy. That means that we live to fight another day to backfill some of the funding that has been lost in these budget cuts, and we are looking forward to making a case for continually fully funding our early learning field as it deserves. If you want to stay connected, please go to the children'salliance.org website. There are ways you can share your story in video form. We are going to be having events over the interim, advocacy camp, and others where folks can build their advocacy power. And we will be regrouping for another exciting legislative session in 2027.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, Soleil. And I'll be including all of the websites to all of the orgs in the follow-up email, which you will be receiving in about 24 hours. So Soleil, I know you've got to leave. So if you need to pop off, again, thanks for being here and thanks for all the amazing work you do.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, you mentioned the millionaire's tax. That will tee up Emily from the Washington State Budget and Policy Center. So Emily, it is yours.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And shout out Soleil for that good tee up, because I'm going to be here. I'm going to share my screen just so I don't miss any of these details. So this helps me make sure that I go over everything. So like Soleil mentioned, the millionaire's tax passed, and we already heard about the really long debate that happened on the House floor, which happened, if you can believe it, last week. And that's just a testament to how wild this session was. And I've been in the revenue and economic justice space for some time now. And I think if you talk to many of us, even just 6 months ago, the thought of this would be really shocking. So we are so excited about this tax passing. I'll kind of give some grounding as to what the tax is and who's going to pay, and then kind of how the funding shakes out, because a lot of changes were made in the final stretch. Again, Emily Bananek, they, them pronouns, with the Washington State Budget and Policy Center. So what is the millionaire's tax? So just in very basic terms, starting in 2029, the millionaire's tax will apply a 9.9% tax to household earnings over $1 million per year. So if you do not earn more than $1 million, you are not going to pay this tax. It's going to generate over $3 billion annually to support our social safety net, all of the great things that our general fund funds, all of the things that we're trying to prevent cuts to. And there's some really key supports for small businesses.
See, and
Just
Emily,
a reminder of who's
I don't think your slides are advancing, by the way. I'm seeing the editing screen, but not the presentation screen, just so you know.
Oh, can you see my screen?
Okay, so now it's showing, it's still the editing screen, but it's on the one who will pay this tax. There you go. Yeah, it looks great.
Is that okay? Okay, let me know if this does not work. Okay.
Yep, no, you're perfect.
Okay. Oh no, my Zoom is quitting. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna be booted out and then I'll have to come back. I'm so sorry.
Oh, okay. No worries.
It's just this happened here. Hopefully, well, maybe it'll go away.
Actually, you're still coming through.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna go as long as it'll let me. There's about
Let's see. Now you're frozen, unfortunately. Let's see if I can. There we go. Okay, Emily will be back. All right. Oh, okay. So Emily, I can still see you and I can still hear you.
I'm so sorry, y'all. For some reason, my Zoom is really loving to crash. So hopefully we can get this going one more time. Okay. Can you see my screen?
I can. It looks great.
Okay, perfect. So again, unless you're earning over $1 million a year, you're not going to pay this tax. We estimate around 20,000 of the wealthiest households in our state are going to pay this tax. And it will apply to residents. If you're here in Washington, it would include all your income. There are cases where non-residents might meet the qualifications of over $1 million in Washington state-based revenue or Washington state-based income. But that would be less common. So what's actually funded through this? Because I think this is actually, there's a lot of information out there. I want to make sure it's really clear some of the huge wins that are a part of this bill and why it goes towards really trying to address our really upside down tax code. One that right now, people with low and middle incomes are paying the highest share of their annual incomes in state and local taxes. So we know that's the case. This is a tax that helps us go in the right direction. And here's a bit about why. So there's a huge expansion to the working families tax credit. And I think this is not being talked about enough. So I'm going to focus on it a little bit. The expansions from this credit will mean that about 20% of Washingtonians are going to benefit from this annual cash boost. That's 810,000 recipients, and it's coming from a few key ways. First, it gets rid of this really arbitrary age restriction to make sure that anyone 18 and older is a part of the eligibility for this credit. So previously there was a really arbitrary age range cap if you didn't have kids. We took that out. The second piece is that it increases all of the eligibility thresholds, the income thresholds for saying, you know, whether you qualify or not. It increases them to put them in alignment with what's called the state needs standard. Essentially, it's just a much more accurate picture of what it takes to like get by in our state, just at a basic level. So that really dramatically increases the pool of people who are eligible for this cash benefit up to $1,300 annually. The second big win that I want to really highlight is, Soleil just talked about a lot of the cuts to early learning. We're really, really happy to see that 5% of the funds of the millionaire's tax will go directly to implement Fair Starts for Kids. This is a program that's actually been really cut the past 2 legislative cycles and was a really big win, especially for supporting things like low-cost childcare and early learning programs. It's been really a shame to see these programs get cut in the ways that they have. But what this tax will do is go to fund those in a much more substantial way and a much more sustainable way. Another big win is exempting many household items that we all rely on from the sales tax. You might not be aware that sometimes when you're going to buy over-the-counter drugs, certain hygiene products like shampoo, toothpaste, your diapers that you go to take care of your kids, you're paying a sales tax on those. This will exempt those household items from the sales tax, which we love to see. And they continue in 2029, and I think this will be really helpful for a lot of the students who might be participating in this, but fully free school meals will start in 2029. This has been an multi-year effort from a lot of food justice advocates, and we're really happy to see this funded in the final bill. There's also dramatic expansions to support for ordinary small businesses. So if you're an ordinary small business and you're paying our state's business tax, you're going to get an even bigger tax credit to help reduce your tax bill at the end of the year. And also, if starting in 2029, when these revenues start to come in, businesses with 250,000 or less in gross receipts won't pay the B&O tax at all. So that's huge for small business support, and the list will go on. There's a lot of nuanced, different details, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just say huge gratitude. I was at the last LEVinar. What a great experience. This is a great group. You're going to learn about all the great work that all the many people here do. And I just wanted to share that piece. Really big celebration. This is a huge, huge step in the right direction. So many, many thanks to everybody who helped get this passed.
Great. Well, Emily, thanks so much and appreciate your persevering through the tech issues. It came through just fine. So, yeah, thanks for all you do. All right, let's move over to LYAC, the Washington State Legislative Youth Advisory Council. Gabriel and Lilah, what were you focused on?
Thank you so much. First of all, so like at the beginning of the year, we decided on three priorities that we would like to lobby for and make sure that policymakers would keep in mind when they were making decisions when passing legislation that would affect youth. And we decided on wellness, inclusivity, and education. But a little kind of more specific thing that we always lobby for or advocate for is civic engagement, always being one of our priorities at LYAC and expanding on youth policy and youth voice in policymaking. And that's just always has been one of our main priorities. So kind of coming off of the civic engagement, one of our biggest legislative priorities this year was SB 6130, which was related to the National Voter Registration Day, which unfortunately did not pass. But this bill was really huge for us because it would actually change the date of when students were given resources about how they can vote, how to register for vote, and information like that. So we are hopeful to see that bill come back next legislative session and pass next legislative session. A couple other bills that we were focused on, House Bill 2126, which is a reduction in and an exemption for taxes on school buses. So this bill also did not unfortunately pass. And I swear we did have bills pass this year, but I'm just not covering them. But House Bill 2126, that one was supposed to be an exemption for school buses. Unfortunately, that one didn't pass because of our very tight fiscal year that we had. But we would have liked to see this one pass mainly because it would have treated school buses similar to like how police cars, um, other like medical transportation vehicles, stuff like that. And they would have all gotten an exempt on the tax. Another bill that we were really positive about was SB 5861, which encouraged community representation in education, which unfortunately also did not pass. But I will pass it to Lilah to kind of share some of our highlights from this legislative session.
Yeah, so you just heard a lot of kind of what we were focusing on that unfortunately did not pass. It was a very hard year for just because of the physical year, but we had two bills that are getting passed into law, which we're very, very excited about. The first one being SB 5105, which talks about kind of sexual depictions of minors being put out. This is a very personal thing to me, and I think that it's definitely a very personal story that's been happening more and more. AI is being so unregulated currently because it's such a new device. So we were really excited to see this bill getting passed. It means that any fabricated depiction or includes any altered image at all. So that was what we were really happy about. It meant that there was no need to prove the identity of the person was a youth, that if it looked like a youth or was assumed to be a youth, that it would be treated as a youth depiction in it. And that was two things we were really, really excited about. It basically uh, made the way of making these things like illicit more clear. The other thing that we're really excited about was HB 1634, which was about providing care with cultural context. So this really aimed to strengthen Washington's regional school safety centers and give schools consistent access to mental health and safety experts. We were really excited about this because it helped districts provide early support and not just crisis response. And this is currently on the governor's desk, so we're really excited about this one as well. That was for kind of two of our wins, and going into the next year and just the rest of we're on a two-term basis, so the rest of this term, we are really focusing on applications. So currently we're putting out applications to a ton of different schools, and obviously our website will be in the link in the recap video. So if you'd love to apply, we are taking all youth that are interested in being in student government and really just getting their ideas out there for civic engagement, making sure that the decisions that are around youth have youth voices in it, because that's just so important to LYAC in general and hopefully the Washington State Legislature. Yeah.
Great.
Absolutely. Something that did forget to mention was actually our Action Day, which is like one of the biggest things that LYAC actually hosts. Although we didn't have like a huge successes in some of our bills around civic engagement, part of what LYAC does is trying to get youth civically engaged and civically minded. So we had around, oh my gosh, Lilah, do you know how many participants we had at Action Day this year?
I think it was 120.
Yeah, around 120 different students came all the way from, honestly, across the state. I think even from Spokane, we had a few groups, but a bunch of youth came to the Capitol and learned lots about the legislative process, how bills are written, how they're passed. We had legislators panel and speak directly to the youth, and take questions, and really like allowed the youth to really get and engage with the legislature, especially oh my gosh, mm, what was our guest speaker's last name? Because he answered a lot of the youth questions and really truly listened to their personal opinions and like what they wanted to see past this legislative session. What was his name? Do you remember, Lilah?
I don't remember. I'm trying to look it up right now, but we can send it out some other time. It's
Okay.
all
No
the
worries.
information's on our website.
Regardless, we are taking applications for LYAC. They'll be serving a term from 2027 to 2029. And it's a 2-year term. You'd be working under Lieutenant Governor's office. It's such an amazing opportunity. And I personally am so grateful for the chance that I had to really engage with the legislature. If you guys have anyone in mind or if you want to apply, you can always contact Eric or go to walayac.org, I believe. Walayac.org.
That's it. Mhm.
Yep, walayac.org and look for more information.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. And Gabriel and Lilah, I'll go to you at the end of the webinar in case you have any other final thoughts you'd like to share after you've heard everyone else. Okay, next we will move on to Linda Hall with Treehouse. Yeah, Linda, I know there was a lot going on there.
To say the least. So I don't know if you all remember the last legislative session where there was $137 million that was cut that were grants and pass-throughs through OSPI. Well, Treehouse was in that bucket of money. So when the final budget closed and we found out that our graduation success, which is our high school completion for youth and foster care program, was annihilated in the budget, none of the legislators knew. So like we got the budget, our lobbyists called us and they're like, you guys are not in here at all. Like you are in that bucket of money that got cut. So a lot of things happened last April. So we actually started our like advocacy as soon as that session closed. We basically went into like all hands on deck. So we reached out to all of our legislators, all of our key champions. They were like horrified, had no idea that we were in that bucket of money. We reached out to the governor's office. We reached out to Superintendent Rachel at OSPI and Secretary Sen at DCYF because Treehouse kind of sits in the middle of those two agencies between child welfare and education. So what ended up happening is that we had to cut services to 400 students that were in our graduation success program. And then cobbled together money from one-time federal funds from OSPI, about $1 million for cash reserves out of our cash reserves, and then fundraising. So we got ourselves up to about $6 million to like keep as many kids intact as possible in that program. So then going into this coming supplemental session, I think what really helped Treehouse was one, the massive coverage that we got through the Seattle Times about who kids in foster care really are, and that the state legislators are their legal guardians. When they are taken out of their homes, they become dependent of the state. So the state being the legislators. So they're the ones that are responsible for their health, well, for their placement, safety, and education. So that's kind of what we use as our talking points. We went back to all of our like key champions. A lot of them sit in places of like leadership on both sides of the table. And then when we made that clear that like these are your kids, you are responsible for them. This is a very small population that people don't understand. And we're a public-private match. So when they give us money, we supplement and raise money. So at our $7 million a year, we were raising $4 million to match that to fully saturate the state. So the win was we got $3.5 million, which is a lot of money considering the budget, woes and all the other programs that didn't fare as well as we did. We had two support agenda items. One was WASAC opening up the eligibility for the Washington College Grant, which was a zero fiscal ask. It was just incorporating kids in foster care into that. So their monies were intact as they were going into post-secondary and oh my gosh, what's the other thing? Post-secondary and apprenticeships. So making that money whole again. But then our partners at Mockingbird wanted to do a statewide voucher. Well, it was a state housing voucher for like 90 to 100 kids. There is a federal one. It's very high barrier. They wanted to launch a pilot and that did not make it through. So we'll be working with them again going into the next session. All of this to say, this $3.5 million is one time. So it's the supplemental budget. We've got to go back again this budget setting year and either advocate for 3.5 or more. We also have another statewide program, which is our older program, our educational advocacy program. That has advocates across the state. They operate virtually now, and they basically reduce barriers to K-12 education. So like if a kid is having problems enrolling, if they're having issues getting their IEPs in place, if they're having issues with discipline, we assign an advocate to the case. They work with the social worker, the caregiver, and then try and resolve those issues. We are operating off of 2006 money, people. So like this program with 14 advocates is $1.1 billion. So we're going to have to figure out like what we're going to be doing. Then we have another program that is up for funding, and they're all out of three separate buckets. So grad success is out of the OSPI money. DCYF is at advocacy. And then we have a high school safety and driving program where we pay for kids to go through driver's ed, make sure they have their ID, they have their license, they went to driver's ed, and then we pay for repairs and upkeep on the car. That one is expiring too, and that's the transportation budget. So we have a lot of work to do and figuring out how we're going to do all of these things and then also support our partners that are also partnering with us in other aspects of life with youth and foster care. So it's been a lot of work. The other thing that we did the first time ever, and Liz Troutman was my saving grace angel that was like, this is how you get a permit. Go to this. And then if you can't find space on campus, go use this house. And it was beautiful. So we had our first ever Treehouse Advocacy Day on January 29th and had 38 meetings with legislators and or staff in one day. It was insane. So we're really happy about that, but we need to work on getting more youth onto the Capitol campus. And I know taking them out of school is a big deal, but they need to see youth and they need to hear youth voice because I think that makes it all real. So I think we're going to do that and do more. We utilized our, Action Alert Center a lot. And then we utilized the media and started putting things in blog posts in major areas of Highline, where Mia Gregerson is the lead budget writer, up in Everett, where June Robinson is, and kind of placing ads and articles in smaller publications in targeted areas. So that's kind of where we are. Did I ramble too much? Did I hit all the points I needed to hit?
That was great. Thank you so much, Linda. Well, you mentioned Liz Troutman. So Liz, what was going on with Washington Stand?
Yeah, thanks for having me here. Let me make sure I'm getting my screen shared. I have a couple slides also to kind of keep me on track. Eric, are you seeing things
Yep.
correctly?
Looks great.
Awesome. So Stan had several priorities. I'm going to talk about a couple of our priorities specifically in the education space, and then a couple of other partner priorities that we were watching closely and glad to support. Um, Many of you know who STAND is. We work across the state to identify and pass and implement high impact policies that will help ensure educational equity for students around the state. The three kind of high school success adjacent priorities that we were tracking. One was a top priority for us, which was funding for the ninth grade success initiative. We were successful in securing 1.5 million to sustain that work. I'll talk in a minute about what that does. And it's important to note that this is still just 50% of the funding level a couple of years ago. So it's a reduced amount. And still critically important to maintain the work statewide. The second thing was a priority for OSPI, Washington Counselors Association, Washington STEM, and a number of other partners to continue implementation of a high school and beyond online common platform, and funding was secured for that. And then the third item in the high school success space that we were watching was cuts to running start funding. And you'll see here that there ultimately was a $7 million cut. I'll speak in just a second about sort of some nuance there to keep in mind. For ninth grade success, the reason why this has been such an ongoing priority for STAND is because of the incredibly powerful, like decades of research that show that performance in the ninth grade is the most predictive factor for on-time graduation for students. So students who pass all their classes in ninth grade are 3 times more likely to graduate high school. But it is the year that a student is most likely to fail a class. And often, kind of counterintuitively, I think both schools historically and students don't think about it as this pivotal year in the way that it is. So that's starting to change with the ninth grade success initiative and dedicated training, coaching, and support for teams at the school level, providing systems and structures of support for ninth graders. And what we're really excited about with this work is the incredible outcomes that we see. So at this point, the ninth grade success initiative is being implemented around the state. It's in about 50 to 60 high schools. There's 50 schools currently receiving that state grant with that 1.5 million, and another 10 who have previously participated in this work and are kind of staying connected to the network. And you can see that over the last 5 years, they've raised their on-track rates 13 percentage points, and that's compared to a 3% or a 3-point increase statewide for non-participating schools. And in addition, that this sort of growth is really grounded in closing equity gaps for students who are furthest from educational justice and often least well served by our education system. So we're really, really proud of the work that this is doing to advance educational equity in Washington State. And we're seeing schools that have been doing this work for 4 or 5 years really starting to close those gaps in graduation as a result of that intentional focus on ninth grade. For the high school and beyond plan, I'll just note that the 1.8 million that was included really is a big win in this budget context. Also, last session, there was not funding included for that implementation, but OSPI was still required to move forward with implementation. So they had used some their budget to keep it going, and this allows them to kind of really fund that work, not quite at the level that they requested, but certainly at a higher level than was in the governor's budget. Running start, I wanted to take just a second to talk about. So this gets a little wonky and technical, but the high level is a couple years ago, 3 years ago, the legislature made a commitment to fund summer running start. So allowing students to take college classes in the summer in addition to the school year while in high school to earn college credit in high school. Unfortunately, the governor's budget proposed eliminating that expansion. That elimination was reflected in the Senate and the House proposal. The final budget did something a little interesting. It reduced it a little bit, and it limited that reduction for 2 years, and said there's a piece of legislation that accompanied this that basically said, if the millionaire's tax passes, then we will go back to like pre-funding levels in a couple of sessions, in a couple of years. So we have this time-limited reduction to 1.3 FTE, which basically means students can take half as many credits over the summer. So they were able to take 10 credits over the summer. Now they can take 5. And then in 2 years from now, we'll go back up to 1.4. So it's kind of a wonky technical thing that, again, all things point back to the millionaires tax, it seems, and we're grateful that that investment is long-term kind of secured, even if short-term we're seeing a cut, which we think is the wrong direction to go. I wanted to very quickly mention another priority that we were really passionate about, which is distraction-free schools. There is a piece of legislation that passed this year that would have, as introduced, required school districts to adopt policies restricting student mobile device use in school. As it passed, it simply requires OSPI to make a report with recommendations in December 2027. 34 states have passed legislation requiring school districts to adopt these policies. They have different ways that that looks, but Washington is increasingly in the minority and not having a state standard around how we handle cell phones in schools. So it's something that we're continuing to look at and look forward to bringing back in 2027. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Liz. I appreciate the updates. That was great. Let's go ahead and move on to behavioral health. There was some talk about that earlier. And Amber, how did things shake out for Washington Thriving and Behavioral Health Catalyst?
Well, hello, thanks for having me. My name is Amber Ulvanis, and I've been working for Behavioral Health Catalyst on the Washington Thriving Plan this year. And I'm going to talk about the plan itself and then about the couple of pieces of legislation that we worked on this session. So in 2022, the legislature passed a bill to direct the already established Children and Youth Behavioral Health Work Group to create a strategic plan to improve youth behavioral health in Washington. Until that point, they had been doing piecemeal things, all good things to improve and advance access and quality of care for youth, but not necessarily in a strategic way. So that legislation came with a little bit of money. The work group contracted with Behavioral Health Catalyst, so that's their connection there to facilitate the creation of the plan. So then Behavioral Health Catalyst spent 3 years researching and interviewing over 300 people across the state to contribute to the plan, including many youth and others with lived experience that could contribute to the plan. So then this past November 3rd, that excuse me, strategic plan was submitted to the legislature. It was informed by parents, caregivers, youth, young adults to describe what that care, that quality care should feel and look like. So it creates a roadmap. And this is not a legislative presentation, so I'm not going to get in trouble for using a visual aid. But if you had it in paper, it's 100 pages long if you wanted to take a look at it. So it contains a lot of great material and truly a roadmap. So it's going to launch us, but it also has a lot of further information as well. And then I'm going to share a slide or two. About that. Sure. Okay. All right, are you seeing my slide now?
Yep, looks great.
All right. Okay, great. So I wanted to put this one up so you could see kind of the essential pieces of Washington Thriving. So it was hard for me to imagine like how big, how broad that scope would be to think, how are we going to improve behavioral health from prenatal to adulthood for in this spectrum of care that's needed for all these people. So it was envisioned as these three components: as system infrastructure, services and supports, and people and relationships as the components of the plan. So for people and relationships component, the goals are to serve all Washingtonians equitably, and then have a system that focuses on what matters to young people, caregivers, family, and workforce. For the services and supports section, the goal is to expand upstream to build strong foundations for wellness. And then for the infrastructure part, we want to make it as easy as possible for young people and their families to find and receive the care that they need. So now that we have this plan, and was accepted and adopted by the legislature, what was first? So the initial work of the plan, the legislative component, was to update the statute for the Children and Youth Behavioral Health Work Group and to officially make the Washington Thriving Plan the work of the legislature. So that was House Bill 2429, which was kind of that structural component. And then a couple of things that were going to be kind of the first initiative components, which was supporting perinatal behavioral health. So that was more about work that would happen in the budget, as well as K-12 student behavioral health, which was House Bill 1634. So the Children and Youth Behavioral Health Work Group will kind of exist as you recognize it now, but have a new role as the implementation advisory body for Washington Thriving. So let me see, I can go to my next slide. I think that talks a bit more about, so what the bill does. So there's going to be executive coordination from the governor's office, state agency leaders, need to be, or their leadership council, which is critical. So how are we going to get out of the silos of how so much work is done now? It will require agency leaders to meet together on implementation of the Washington Thriving Plan. So, as you can imagine, that involves about 5 different agencies, just kind of right off the bat, that are going to have some role in implementation here. That kind of central leadership entity will also have parents and tribal members as part of that work. And, one of the things that we really worked on this session was making sure that we did have adequate tribal representation that felt right to the tribes in the work. And then so anyway, we did get this bill. It was signed by the governor this week. Super exciting. You may have seen like on LinkedIn or something, but it's not, doesn't pack quite the punch that it could have, because we had to keep stripping out anything that had a fiscal, that would, that could had an impact on the fiscal note, and trying to reduce that as much as possible. So it directs some work for the governor's office itself and changes structures and statute, but doesn't really provide funding yet to say, okay, now go out and do these things. And then kind of similarly with the other bill that we worked on, House Bill 1634, it would have been amazing to be able to fund this work, to give the OSPI some money to do this, to give the ESDs money to do this, to pass through to schools on how to implement a coordinated behavioral health response to students. This is work that, some ESDs have been working on for a while, but what we really need is something at the state level that can be done the most efficiently with, using the absolute most that we can out of the funding that we have to use in behavioral health. So here is more about this bill as well, just like creating the strategy, fill in the rest of the work later. Hopefully we'll be able to get more funding for this, but it really this year was about setting us up with a structure to get going on the Washington Thriving Plan.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Amber. It's exciting. Yeah, I have my pen from the governor signing. Gosh, what was that? Just the other day. Anyway, yeah, very exciting to see how this work is going to evolve. And behavioral health also relates somewhat to 1795, House Bill 1795, which was mentioned briefly by Soleil. And Andrea, I'd like to hear more about that and what the next steps will be for that work to limit restraint and hopefully end isolation of students at some point. By the way, I know we're at time, so if any of you need to jump, just because we're at time, feel free to do so. But if you'd like to stick around and give any final thoughts, you're welcome to do that too. So Andrea, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eric. Can you hear me okay? All right. Really appreciate it. I'll try to really shorten this because I know I may be holding some of you back from lunch or Friday afternoon affairs. So yes, this relates very much to behavioral health. The whole idea behind our policy work has been to try to get because we know restraint and isolation happens to our most traumatized students, to our foster care students, to our homeless students, to students with disabilities, to our Black and Brown students. So what we've been trying to do is really get those upfront behavioral supports for students in place and strong systems in schools, like multi-tiered systems of support, so that we're not relying on restraint or isolation. So we have other tools to use, right? So that's what we really we want our policy to shift our focus to those earlier supports. And remember, restraint and isolation are aversive interventions, so they come out of institutionalization. They were used in practices in institutions long before we moved students with disabilities into public education. Aversive interventions are painful stimuli that are used to control behavior. So these are not practices that are based in neuroscience. They're not evidence-based practices. They're practices that really are harmful to the educators, the students, and the students who experience restraint and isolation and the students who witness restraint and isolation. So we really want to reduce these practices. And just to clarify, isolation is when a student is locked alone in a room that is padded. Well, it doesn't have to be padded, but they're often padded. They're often closet-size rooms, and so these aren't sensory spaces. They aren't calming spaces or anything like that. So we want to ultimately eliminate isolation and dramatically reduce the use of restraint, because we recognize there are times you might have to restrain a student to save their life, say, but we don't need 24,000 incidents of restraint in a year. That's a lot. So this year, I just want to lift my colleagues here, because as others have mentioned, this was a very, very intense legislative session. We've had all this sort of fallout from the federal government that's created a lot of confusion. And I have to say, I've been really heartened by Washington. I think Washington's really tried to come together to support our students and our youth in the midst of all the changes that are happening at the federal level. And for every success that you see in the legislature, what I've learned is that for every win, there are 4 or 5 or 10 problematic things that didn't happen, that were stopped, and that took a lot of hard work. So I just want to give a shout out to my colleagues for all their hard work this session. The bill that we managed to pass, that we weren't even going to run, I'm still scratching my head over how all this happened. We managed to ban chemical and mechanical restraint this year. So that's restraint using sedatives or pepper spray, or restraint using belts, zip ties, handcuffs, restraint that uses devices. We managed to ban that this year. We also managed to ban restraint that interferes with breathing or blood flow. And the legislature, in the intent of the bill, said that they agree to that they were going to work to ban isolation by the year 2031. We also were able to get a prohibition on all new isolation room construction. So from now on, we won't be building any more isolation rooms, which was also a big win for us. So those are the big pieces that came through with this legislation. And LYAC, I'm looking at you because of several years ago, there was interest. Are they still here? Oh yes, Lilah is still here. Several years ago, there was interest in banning and having sensory spaces and calming spaces instead of isolation rooms, or converting those rooms. And so if you all are still interested in that, maybe we could talk in the interim as future policy. And we'll be doing a lot of work in the interim to continue to educate people on this policy. Really grateful for all of the support on this in this work, and for everything everybody here does. And I'll stop there. I'll stop there.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Andrea, and really appreciate all of your work leading this too. So yes, we will continue during the interim for sure. Jacob, you can bring us home. Anything that you'd like to mention hadn't been mentioned already. Then I'll go back to all of you for just a quick lightning round of any final thoughts. So Jacob, take it away.
I'll make this quick. Just so much so many important things have been covered so far. One additional thing is around, as I mentioned before, K-12 funding, and not to get too in the weeds on this one, but something called local effort assistance. This is a program often referred to as LEA. That's state funding that goes to districts to make up for the inequities in our local levy system. Our local levy system is inequitable because wealthier areas can raise more money than lower income areas while paying a lower tax rate. So LEA is a program that's meant to not overcome that inequity, but make that inequity less intense, less severe. And the other context is last session in 25, the state raised how much you could raise in the local levy system, in part to relieve financial pressure on districts. And they added a little more towards LEA funding to kind of so that gap wouldn't keep on growing too much. So what they did this session was they took away about $27 million from LEA of the increases they had put forward last year. So what that means is not only you're taking that money away from districts, specifically lower income districts, but you're also widening the gap between how much lower income districts can access the local levy system, and how much wealthier districts can raise the local levy system. So not only are you taking away from certain districts, but you're widening the inequity that is present across the system, because as everyone on the call knows, local districts rely on levies for key elements of supporting students. So unfortunate inclusion in the budget, that reduction is really going to be impacting districts in the coming year. And that's all. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, have time for a quick lightning round. I'm going to go in the order that I see you on my screen. So Linda, you'll be first, and Lilah, you'll go last, because I always like when students have the last word. So Linda, any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Final thoughts. We have big work ahead, people. 4 months of session, and we get a little breather, and then we're probably going to start mid to late summer trying to figure out like what our asks are going to be and working with our partners. So those are my final thoughts. Take some time, take a break, and just know that you'll be back at it sooner than later.
Okay, great. Andrea, any final thoughts? No final thoughts. Okay, Liz, any final thoughts?
I'm incredibly grateful to everyone on the screen and everyone watching today. There were some real bright spots and some big wins in the midst of some really heartbreaking losses. And so I just appreciate the incredible work, and that we continue to move towards a system that is more just and more responsive to community. So thank you all.
Great, thank you. Amber, any final thoughts?
Just that I have hope. I'm coming away from today with hope and that things can get better.
Great. Yeah, Emily, any final thoughts from you?
Just a lot of gratitude and just would say, oh, if I'm present, a lot of gratitude. I would say, you know, the work that we were able to do to pass the millionaire's tax this session is being watched around the nation. And it takes a big swing at our upside down tax code. And it is, just to ground us, a very drop in the bucket of our operating budget. So if we want to right side up tax code, we have a lot more work. And I'm just like ready to make sure that all the great things that are in this room that are being talked about are amply funded. And I know we can do it.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, Carey, any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts. Maybe continue to use your voice, continue to pay attention, and know that even though session's a real intense time, work is being done around the year. And so you have the opportunity to meet with people outside of session and really sit down and explain things you can't do in those little sound bites of meetings we get during January till April. And thank you.
Yeah, that is sage advice. Thank you, Carey. Jacob, any final thoughts?
I mean, it's been referenced by a lot of folks already, but it's the advocates that are working in the interim, that are working during session, talking to legislators, going to meetings, putting in calls that really create the conditions for this change to happen. So really appreciative and inspired by all the folks who have engaged this session and really thankful for that.
Great, thank you. And Lilah, you have the last word.
I just want to say that as a representative of the youth, and I've heard so many stories about how, and just hearing about what everybody is doing, like how inspired it is to hear about how much people around the government and around Washington care about youth. And I think that it's such an important sector and we're the next generation, and it's so inspiring to hear, like, even through all the falls and even through all the ups, that so much work is being done to improve life quality around youth and just making sure that they have the best possible chance to get started and like do their best in life. So it's really just so inspiring, and we're really grateful for all of the work around it.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Lilah. And thanks for Gabriel, who had to leave, and Soleil, who also had to take off, Linda, Andrea, Liz, Amber, Emily, Carey, and Jacob. And I really appreciate everything you shared today. Appreciate the participation and the reactions from folks in the audience. Our next webinar will focus on an upcoming report by the Learning Policy Institute that spotlights Washington State supports for students experiencing homelessness. We're working to finalize the date and the panelists, and we will share registration information on our website and on our social media channels. We are also hosting a webinar on Thursday, May 14th, this is a ways out, on AI in education. We'll spotlight how AI is now being used in the classroom, explore which guardrails must be in place to protect students and families, and discuss skills that students will need to be ready for the workforce. Registration information will be shared in the follow-up email, and it's also on our website, educationvoters.org. Just go to events, then lunchtime webinars. Spanish interpretation and English closed captioning will be available. Thank you to each of you for joining us today. If you have additional questions or comments, please send them to me at Eric, A-R-I-K, at educationvoters.org. A recording of today's presentation will be available on our website and will be sent to you in the follow-up email. So you should receive that in about 24 hours, and please share the recording with your friends and colleagues. We'll also have an AI summary, so that, speaking of AI, that'll make it easier to digest what was shared today. If you'd like to learn more about League of Education Voters or support our work, please visit our website, educationvoters.org. Thank you again for attending. Each one of us has the right to feel safe and valued. Together, we will fight for a world in which true economic and educational equity exists. We look forward to seeing you at future webinars. Lilah, Gabriel, Soleil, Linda, Andrea, Liz, Amber, Emily, Carey, and Jacob, thank you again for joining us. Thank you for all you do for Washington students and families, and may have a wonderful weekend.